Most people treat their refrigerator like a box that just keeps food cold. Nothing more. Chinese home cooks treat it like a second kitchen, one that preps, marinates, and organizes food while they sleep. Today, you are counting down 25 refrigerator secrets straight from Chinese kitchens that will genuinely save you hours every single week. Stick around until the end, because number 1 is the single storage system that makes every other secret on this list actually work. 25. Marinating meat. Overnight in the fridge door, not the main shelf. Most people shove marinating meat onto the coldest middle shelf, assuming colder always means safer and better. Sichuan home cooks marinating pork or chicken. The next day's braise know the door tells a different story. You place your marinating container on the door shelf instead, letting it sit there overnight rather than at the very back of the fridge. The door experiences small temperature swings every time it opens, staying a few degrees warmer than the main compartment on average. That slightly warmer, more stable range keeps the marinade's enzymes and salt working through the meat via gradual osmosis, rather than slowing everything down to a near standstill the way a colder shelf would. What pulls out the next morning is meat that's deeply seasoned all the way through, ready to sear up rich and flavorful the moment it hits a hot wok. 24. Pre-portioning ginger and garlic into ice cube trays. Home cooks across Guangdong, mincing fresh aromatics for every single meal. Know how much time disappears into that one repetitive task. You mince a large batch of ginger and garlic at once, pack it into an ice cube tray with a thin layer of oil, then freeze until solid. Most people mince a small amount fresh each time they cook, repeating the same knife work night after night for no real reason. Freezing the aromatics suspended in oil protects their delicate volatile compounds from oxidizing in open air, preserving pungency far longer than loose mince left in a container ever could. Once frozen, you pop out a single cube and drop it straight into a hot wok whenever a recipe calls for aromatics. Each cube melts almost instantly against hot oil, releasing its full sharp fragrance the moment it hits the pan. What results is a shortcut that turns 15 minutes of daily prep into a 5-second reach into the freezer, with flavor that stays every bit as vivid and pungent as the day you made it. 23. Storing greens. Wrapped in a damp paper towel. Leafy greens wilt fast once they're separated from their roots, something most home cooks accept as simply unavoidable. You wrap bok choy or gai lan loosely in a damp paper towel, then slide the bundle into a loosely closed bag before placing it in the crisper. Cantonese vegetable vendors selling greens fresh every morning have long known that a little added moisture keeps leaves from drying out during transport and storage. That damp towel maintains a steady layer of moisture around the leaves, slowing the transpiration that causes cells to lose water and go limp. Wrapped this way, greens that would normally wilt within 2 days can hold their crispness for well over a week in the fridge. What pulls out of the crisper days later is greens that are still crisp, vibrant, and snap cleanly the moment you bite into them. 22. The cook once, eat 3 times. Master stock jar. Most people make a fresh stock or braising liquid from scratch every single time a recipe calls for one. You keep a large jar of stock or braising liquid chilled in the fridge, pulling from it throughout the week instead of starting over each time. Restaurant kitchens across Hong Kong have run continuous braising pots for years, treating a standing jar of liquid as a living, evolving ingredient rather than a single-use byproduct. Each time you use a portion, you top the jar back up with fresh water, soy sauce, and aromatics, letting new compounds gradually infuse into what's already dissolved from before. That constant layering builds a depth of flavor that a fresh batch could never replicate on its first use. What sits chilled in your fridge is a jar that grows richer with every single use, ready to deepen soups, braises, and stir-fry sauces the moment you need a shortcut to real depth of flavor. 21. Blanching vegetables before fridge storage. Raw vegetables tossed straight into the crisper often turn limp and sad within just a couple of days. You blanch vegetables like broccoli or green beans in boiling water for 90 seconds, then plunge them immediately into ice water before drying and refrigerating. Home cooks across Shanghai prepping vegetables ahead for a busy week rely on this quick step to keep produce looking freshly cut for days longer than raw storage ever allows. That brief burst of heat deactivates the enzymes responsible for the slow breakdown of cell walls, the exact process that causes vegetables to soften and discolor over time in storage. The ice bath immediately afterwards stops the cooking before the vegetables lose their bite. What pulls out of the fridge days later is vegetables that are bright, crisp, and ready to drop straight into a hot wok without a single limp piece in the bunch. 20. Storing dumplings, uncooked on a floured tray. Before freezing, frozen dumplings dumped straight into a bag often thaw into one solid solid, unusable brick by the time you need them. Home cooks across northern China, making dumplings by the hundred for Lunar New Year, know a single extra step avoids that entirely. You arrange uncooked dumplings in a single layer on a lightly floured tray, freeze them for 2 hours until solid, then transfer them into a bag. That initial flash freeze locks each dumpling's shape and moisture in place through rapid crystallization, keeping ice crystals small and preventing individual pieces from fusing together as they touch. Once frozen solid, the dumplings slide apart freely inside the bag instead of clumping into one mass. What pulls out of the freezer months later is dumplings that separate cleanly, ready to drop straight into boiling water one at a time, coming out plump and tender, exactly as if freshly made. 19. The 2-container rule for raw and cooked meat. Most people store raw and cooked meat on whatever shelf has space, assuming the fridge's cold temperature alone. You keep raw meat in a sealed container on the bottom shelf and cooked meat in a separate container above it, never letting the two share the same surface. Cantonese kitchens preparing both raw ingredients and finished dishes for a busy service enforce this separation as a basic, non-negotiable habit. Juices from raw meat carry bacteria capable of cross-contaminating anything they touch through simple physical contact, a risk that has nothing to do with how cold the fridge actually runs. Placing raw meat on the bottom shelf also means any dripping liquid falls away from other food rather than onto it. What results is a fridge where nothing sits at risk of picking up bacteria from something else, keeping every dish that comes out of it safe and exactly as intended. If you've ever gotten to Wednesday and realized cooking dinner suddenly feels like a chore again, stick around, because number 14 is exactly the fix for that. 18. Pre-mixing. Stir-fry sauces in small jars. Most people reach for 5 different bottles every single time they cook a stir-fry, measuring out soy sauce, sugar, and cornstarch from scratch each night. You mix a week's worth of stir-fry sauce combinations into small labeled jars on a Sunday, storing them in the fridge door for grab-and-go use. Home cooks across Sichuan, juggling multiple dishes a week, rely on pre-mixed sauce bases to skip the nightly measuring entirely. Combining the ingredients ahead of time lets the cornstarch fully hydrate through gradual dispersion, so the sauce thickens smoothly the moment it hits a hot pan instead of clumping. You simply grab a jar and pour. What results is dinner that comes together in minutes, with a sauce that's glossy, balanced, and consistent every single time you reach for a different jar in the door. 17. Storing rice in the fridge to resist. Stalling cooked rice left out on the counter turns hard and stale within just a few hours, something most people simply accept as inevitable. You transfer leftover rice into a shallow container and refrigerate it within 30 minutes of cooking, rather than leaving it out to cool slowly first. Cantonese households prepping rice ahead for fried rice the next day rely on quick chilling to keep the grains from turning gluey or rock hard. Rapid chilling slows starch retrogradation, the process where starch molecules realign and stiffen as rice cools, which is exactly what makes old rice turn hard and grainy. What pulls out of the fridge the next day is rice that reheats fluffy and separate, especially perfect for frying into a dish with individual grains rather than one dense clump. 16. The egg in the door myth debunked. Most refrigerators ship with a dedicated egg tray built right into the door, leading nearly everyone to assume that's exactly where eggs belong. You move your eggs to a middle shelf instead, keeping them in their original carton rather than the built-in door tray. Food safety-conscious households across Beijing preparing eggs daily for breakfast dishes have shifted away from the door specifically because of temperature swings. Every time the door opens, it experiences small temperature fluctuations through repeated exposure to room temperature air. Swing eggs are more sensitive to than most people realize. That fluctuation encourages bacteria to multiply faster near the shell's surface compared to the steadier cold of an interior shelf. What sits on that middle shelf is eggs that stay fresher for longer, with a consistent, reliably cold environment protecting them from one carton to the next. 15. Storing tofu. Submerged in water, changed. Daily tofu, left in its original packaging, often turns slimy and starts absorbing fridge odors within just a couple of days. Home cooks across Fujian, prepping tofu-based dishes throughout the week, rely on a simple trick to stretch its freshness much further. You transfer tofu into a container, submerge it completely in fresh water, then change that water once every day. Submerging tofu in fresh water each day flushes out the compounds responsible for off odors through simple diffusion, while also preventing the surface from drying out and developing a slimy film. What pulls out of the water days later is tofu that's clean, firm, and completely free of any sour smell, ready to slice into any dish exactly as fresh as the day you bought it. We are officially halfway through this list, and if these secrets have been useful so far, hit subscribe now, because the second half is where things get really interesting. 14. Pre-chopping, a week's worth of stir-fry vegetables. On Sunday, most people chop vegetables fresh every single night, turning a 15-minute stir-fry into a half-hour ordeal by the time prep is done. You spend 1 hour on a Sunday chopping a full week's worth of vegetables, storing each type separately in its own labeled container in the fridge. Home cooks across Guangdong, balancing full-time jobs with nightly cooking, rely on this single batch session to make weeknight dinners actually manageable. Keeping vegetables separated by type, rather than mixed together, slows the enzymatic browning that happens faster once cut surfaces touch and exchange moisture. You simply pull a container and start cooking. What results is a week where dinner comes together in the time it takes oil to heat, with vegetables that stay bright, crisp, and ready exactly when you need them. 13. Freezing scallions. Whole in a bag for instant garnish. Scallions wilt and turn slimy within days, faster than almost any other vegetable sitting in a typical crisper drawer. You wash and dry a full bunch of scallions, then freeze them whole, unsliced, directly in a freezer bag straight from the store. Home cooks across Sichuan, finishing nearly every dish with a scattering of fresh scallion, have shifted to freezing them whole, specifically to skip the constant restocking trip. Freezing halts the enzymatic decay responsible for wilting almost completely, holding the scallion's structure in a kind of suspended stasis until you're ready to use it. You simply pull the frozen bunch out and slice directly while still frozen. What lands on your dish is scallion that's bright green, sharp, and fresh tasting, straight from the freezer with none of the sliminess fresh scallions develop. After just a few days out. 12. The soy sauce and vinegar shelf-stable. Exception. Most people assume every single condiment in the kitchen belongs in the fridge the moment it's opened. You leave soy sauce and rice vinegar out on the counter or in a pantry cabinet instead, reserving fridge space for things that actually need it. Home cooks across Guangdong, running small kitchens with limited fridge space, have long known which bottles never needed to take up valuable shelf room in the first place. Soy sauce and vinegar both carry naturally high salt or acid content, an environment inhospitable enough to most spoilage organisms that refrigeration adds little practical benefit. You simply free up an entire shelf for things that genuinely need the cold. What results is a fridge with noticeably more usable space, while your soy sauce and vinegar sit exactly where they've always kept perfectly fine. 11. Storing dried mushrooms and shrimp in the fridge, not the pantry. Most people assume anything labeled dried belongs safely in a pantry cabinet, far away from fridge space. You transfer dried shiitake mushrooms and dried shrimp into sealed containers or bags, then store them in the fridge instead of a cabinet. Home cooks across humid Guangdong province have shifted this exact storage habit specifically to protect against the region's persistent moisture in the air. Ambient humidity gradually reintroduces moisture into dried goods through slow rehydration, creating exactly the damp environment mold and pantry bugs need to take hold. What sits in your fridge months later is mushrooms and shrimp that stay completely dry and intact, ready to rehydrate into a broth that's just as deeply savory as the day you bought them. 10. The cook double freeze half. Dumpling and bao method. Most people cook exactly what they plan to eat that day, missing an easy chance to bank a future meal for almost no extra effort. You steam a full double batch of dumplings or bao at once, eating half fresh and freezing the other half fully cooked rather than raw. Home cooks across Shanghai preparing bao for busy households have long treated this doubling habit as the difference between cooking every single day and cooking twice a week. Freezing food that's already fully cooked locks in moisture through a much gentler process than freezing raw dough, since the proteins have already set and won't shift texture the same way during a reheat. You simply pull the frozen half from the freezer and steam for a few minutes. What comes out is bao and dumplings that taste exactly as soft and fluffy as the day they were first made, ready in a fraction of the usual prep time. If you've ever opened your fridge to find a soggy container of leftovers you completely forgot about, drop a comment right now, because number 7 is exactly the fix for that. 9. Labeling and rotating leftovers. With masking tape and dates. Leftovers pushed to the back of a shelf tend to vanish from memory entirely, only to be discovered weeks later well past their prime. You write the date directly onto a strip of masking tape and stick it to every container the moment food goes into the fridge. Home cooks across Beijing, managing a full week of leftovers alongside fresh cooking, rely on this simple habit to stop food from disappearing into the back of a shelf unnoticed. A dated label turns an ambiguous guess into a fact you can check at a glance, removing the uncertainty that usually leads to food being tossed out of caution rather than actual spoilage. What results is a fridge where nothing gets forgotten and every container tells you exactly how fresh it still is. 8. Storing ginger. buried in sand or soil, or a fridge substitute. Most people leave a knob of ginger loose in the crisper, watching it shrivel and turn woody within a couple of weeks. You wrap unpeeled ginger loosely in a slightly damp paper towel, then seal it inside a container with the lid left slightly ajar, mimicking the humid, buried conditions ginger naturally prefers. Farming households across rural China have long buried ginger directly in sand or soil for months of storage, relying on that consistent, humid environment to keep it plump. That slightly damp, semi-sealed environment slows moisture loss through the same principle as the sand burial method, without demanding an actual patch of soil in your kitchen. What pulls out of the fridge weeks later is ginger that's still plump, firm, and sharp enough to release its full peppery bite the moment it hits a hot pan. 7. The condensation problem in sealed containers. Most people seal leftovers into an airtight container immediately after cooking, assuming a tight seal always means better preservation. You let food cool for at least 15 minutes before sealing it, or leave the container lid propped slightly ajar until the steam has fully escaped. Home cooks across Sichuan storing rice and stir-fries overnight have learned that trapped heat inside a sealed container becomes a problem of its own making. Hot food sealed immediately creates trapped steam that condenses back onto the food's surface through simple cooling, soaking rice grains and vegetables in excess moisture they never had to begin with. What pulls out of the fridge the next day is food that's dry, intact, and exactly the texture it was when it first went in, with none of the sogginess a rushed seal would have caused. 6. Pre-marinating. A week of proteins in labeled bags. On Sunday, most people decide what to cook and start marinating on the same night, leaving barely any time for real flavor to develop before dinner. You portion a week's worth of chicken, pork, and beef into individual bags on a Sunday, adding each marinade before sealing and labeling every bag by day. Home cooks across Guangdong, balancing full work weeks with home-cooked dinners, rely on this single session to set every night's protein already halfway finished before Monday even begins. Marinating for a full day or more lets salt and seasoning penetrate deep into the meat through slow, sustained diffusion, something a rushed 30-minute soak the same night can never fully replicate. You simply grab the bag labeled for that day and cook. What lands in the pan is protein that's deeply seasoned all the way through, delivering a flavor far more developed than anything mixed together the same night. 5. Storing fresh noodles. Dusted in cornstarch, not flour. Most people dust fresh noodles with flour before storage, assuming any starchy powder does the same basic job of keeping strands apart. You toss freshly cut noodles in a light coating of cornstarch instead, then store them in a sealed container or bag in the fridge. Home cooks across Shanghai province making noodles by hand for the week rely on this small substitution to keep strands from fusing into a single clumped mass overnight. Flour contains gluten-forming proteins that continue developing even after the dough is cut, encouraging cut surfaces to bond together wherever they touch inside a sealed container. Cornstarch carries no such proteins, so it coats the noodle's surface without triggering any further bonding between strands. What pulls out of the fridge the next day is noodles that separate easily by hand, ready to drop straight into boiling water exactly as loose and springy as the day they were cut. 4. The back of the fridge cold zone for delicate herbs. Most people toss fresh herbs into the crisper drawer alongside sturdier vegetables, assuming every part of the fridge offers the same level of cold. You place delicate herbs like cilantro and Thai basil toward the back of a middle shelf instead, away from the door and away from the crisper drawer entirely. Home cooks across southern China finishing dishes with fresh herbs at the very last moment know these delicate leaves spoil faster than almost anything else stored in a typical fridge. The back of a middle shelf sits closest to the cooling vent, holding the most consistent and coldest temperature range in the entire appliance. What sits at the back of that shelf days later is herbs that stay vividly green and fragrant, holding their delicate structure far longer than anything left in the crisper drawer. 3. Batch cooking. Master braising liquid and portioning it into the freezer. Most people make braising liquid fresh every single time a recipe calls for one, treating each batch as a completely separate, one-time task. You cook one large batch of master braising liquid on a weekend, then portion it into individual containers before freezing everything except what you'll use within the week. Restaurant kitchens across Hong Kong, maintaining a single braising pot for years, have effectively done this at scale. keeping flavor compounding continuously rather than starting fresh every time. Freezing individual portions locks the liquid's developed flavor in place through a kind of suspended stasis, halting any further change until the moment you thaw it. What results is a freezer stocked with instant depth of flavor, ready to turn any weeknight braise into something that tastes like it's simmered for hours. 2. The first in, first out shelf rotation system. Most people restock their fridge by pushing new items to the front, leaving whatever was already there buried and forgotten at the back. You physically move older items to the front of the shelf every time you bring in groceries, sliding anything new to the very back instead. Home cooks across Sichuan, managing a fridge that never sits empty for long, rely on this simple rotation habit to make sure nothing gets left behind to spoil unnoticed. That constant physical rotation keeps the oldest items in your direct line of sight every single time you open the door, removing the guesswork that leads to forgotten leftovers. What results is a fridge where the oldest food is always the easiest to see and use first, cutting down on spoiled, forgotten items sitting untouched at the back of a shelf. Now, this final trick is the most powerful one on this entire list. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this. 1. The complete fridge zoning system that ties it all together. Home cooks across Sichuan, Guangdong, and Shanghai, 3 regions with completely different culinary traditions, all rely on the exact same underlying logic once food goes into a fridge. They never treat the fridge as one uniform cold space. They treat it as several distinct zones, each suited to a different kind of ingredient. Most people load groceries into whatever open spot they find first, never realizing that where something sits matters just as much as how cold the fridge runs overall. Here is the complete system. First, match temperature zone to ingredient. The coldest back of shelf zone for delicate herbs and greens, the milder door zone for marinating meats and condiments, the bottom shelf reserved strictly for raw proteins. Second, match container type to purpose. Sealed containers for anything prone to drying out. Loosely covered containers for anything that needs a little escaping steam. Third, always rotate old to the front and new to the back the moment groceries come in, never leaving that step for later. Temperature zone, container type, rotation order, apply this system, and every single secret on this list, from marinating meat in the door to storing tofu submerged in water, works together instead of as isolated tricks. This is the system that changes everything, because your fridge stops being a place where food goes to be forgotten and starts working as a second kitchen, prepping and preserving while you do everything else. If you want one more trick before we go, build a single grab-and-go dinner kit using what's already sitting in your fridge from earlier on this list. Pull a cube of frozen ginger and garlic from item 24, a jar of pre-mixed stir-fry sauce from item 18, and a bag of pre-chopped vegetables from item 14. Then, combine them straight into a hot wok. What comes together in minutes is a full dinner that tastes like it took an hour, built entirely from 5-minute decisions made earlier in the week. Our mission on this channel is simple. We dig up the real techniques Chinese cooks have trusted for generations and break them down so you can bring them into your own kitchen without guesswork. If any one of these 25 secrets earns a spot in your weekly routine, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another guide like this one. We have got more coming your way, from the hidden techniques behind Cantonese wok cooking to 33 clever dumpling folding tricks passed down through generations of home cooks. Stay sharp, stay organized, and keep that fridge working overtime, because the best kitchen shortcuts are usually the ones nobody bothered to tell you about. Drop a comment below with the one refrigerator secret from this list you are trying first, and let us see which number wins.